Hi, this is Fran with Stampendous. I hope you are well and staying home if that's what you need to be doing right now, as many of us are. I hope that you will find some crafting will be just the thing to help you spend your time wisely. So what I'm doing today will be featuring some of our wonderful little dog kisses. This is a clear stamp set. And I decided that while many of you will not have had a chance to get the newest clear stamps that were part of the watercolor series, that it would be a perfect time to feature some stamps that you may have on hand already. These have been very popular, and they're the perfect theme for us today to learn how to watercolor and mix some browns and grays. So we're using the Daniel Smith Paints Essential Set of 6 colors. We're using a very particular palette that lays flat and gives us a beautiful layout and a place for all of the different colors. The chart will identify all the colors and everything. And we're going to be doing more with this area up here, mixing our browns and black, cool black colors. And we've developed this wonderful color wheel with Daniel Smith, so that you can see how these 6 split primary colors, when I take the 3 warm colors together, that's what's giving me the browns that we're going to be using today. And the 3 primary cool colors, when mixed together, unbelievably will give me the dark cool colors that we need. And this beautiful array of gorgeous colors all come from this one set. I'm using my favorite watercolor brush. I'm using Canson watercolor paper, cold press, 140 pound. And with those materials, we are ready to start in here. So in my palette, since we're using a lot of browns and grays to paint all of our little furry friends here, I've set up in advance. I put the 3 warm colors, the scarlet, the new gamboge, and the French ultramarine. You can always reference the chart here to see. And I've placed these in this large area at the top of my palette. And now I simply will take a wet brush and begin to swirl back and forth between those 3 colors until I get the shade of brown that I'm looking for. And generally I'm not doing all that much with browns, but now we're going to be doing a lot more of that today. So I wanted to explain my little plan here using the panels, the pockets over here to the side. And what I've done, and just so you, some of this takes a while to do the mixing, and you just have to eye it to see what's happening. And remember that whatever has been mixed before will be revived, and even now I'm going to move things out of the way, and I'm going to use my spray bottle to get this whole area damp again. And so whatever you've mixed before will remain there to be revived with water and lifted on your brush. So here's a dark brown, you can see, and I have loaded up this first pocket up here with as much of this dark brown as I can. And then now I want more of a reddish brown, so I'm dipping into more of the scarlet over here. And now that that looks like a beautiful scarlet, I'm putting that into the next compartment. And I might want even a little bit more of that reddish color to it. And then I'm working it off of my brush into that compartment. And then if I want a lighter brown, then I'm just adding more of the gamboge. And now with this mixture, I will put this more into this compartment as best I can. And down here was a place to do an even lighter shade and add some more water to it if I want a soft or a very light tan color perhaps. And okay, so None of this paint has been wasted. I've just moved it around, but by using those compartments, that is going to give me quite a bit of paint to work with, actually. And over here, I've done the 3 cool colors in this compartment, the rose, the Hansa yellow light, and the phthalo blue. And again, by swirling those together, I will get some cooler dark colors and work it to black. And admittedly, the black takes longer to get it all mixed. And if you only had the rose and the blue, you would get a purpley color. But if you notice on the color wheel, the complementary color of your yellows is the purple. So it's surprising, but the yellow is actually what neutralizes that purple to get me closer to the cool black or gray colors that I want. And you just have to keep working it around. So I've tried to do some of that ahead so that as I get going, you won't be just waiting for me to mix. And you're just going to have to get the feel of it. And if you have some paints in some of these colors and can just squirt them out, that's great. But I wanted you to know that today I will be using only what I have mixed and made from my 6 primary colors. Now I've prepared another little panel where I've got 3 of the little dogs together. And as many of you would be familiar with, let's see, I'll mention that I cut my paper to a size that worked ideally with an A2 card. And we talked about how your A2 card will work really well with this size of the inner panel, and an outer frame is the black piece that you see here. And if you start from those pieces and tape the edges in, you'll still be in the proportions that fit a card the best, and it gives a really good yield. And these are downloads available on the watercolor area of the website for you. So I'm using your simple masking tape. I like the neutral color of it. It is quite tacky, so before you place it down, and on this one I'm working on a little clipboard so that I can move it in and out of view for you. Actually, I'll move some things up here, make sure you can see it. So when you take your tape, press it to remove some of the tackiness onto another surface. And then when you press it down, press all along those inside edges. And I just eyed an even area all the way around that might give me enough to be able to do a torn edge. So this has now been taped in place and pressed down so that the watercolor paints won't likely come underneath. But when I'm ready to remove the tape, remove it easily and it shouldn't tear the paper. So then to do the masking, as many of you stampers are familiar with, I can stamp onto the sticky notes. I stamped the ears up to the top of my sticky edge, and you have room for 2 puppy dogs, or in this case, a bulldog and a llama. More to come. And then I pulled three, you could even do 3 or 4 sheets. You might as well cut a stack of them while you're at it. Leave the stamped one on the top, and then you know what you have available, and pull from the bottom the unstamped ones. And so stamp whichever character you want to be in the front. In this case, it was this one. I stamped that first, cover it up, stamp to the left or the right, and I just put the additional ones on. But these aren't going to be a waterproof thing, but they help me get all of my little characters stamped in place. And then you can reuse these, so save your masks for the next project. And then when you go to cut them out, in this case where you have a hard line edge, cut right up close to the edge or even into that line, and then that will give you the best mask. Okay, so I've stamped these ahead so that the VersaFine ink has had time to dry. we've got our little message up here, and we will start in, I'm trying to decide whether we paint the background first or we paint the little dogs first. Let's do the little dogs first in this case. And I've turned things around so that you can see. We talked about mixing our different colors. And let's start here with a little bit of a very reddish brown, adding some more of the scarlet to that compartment. Okay, and let's add some fun little colors here to our, and again I'm just doing really loose little brush strokes here. Okay, and then maybe we'll do some browns over here. That's a little bit wet. I didn't test it. I'm going to reach a little bit more of the gray or black area. Let's see, I'll add this and then I may move some of this around. And since that was a bit wet, puddles sometimes can be tricky. I'm now taking a cleaner brush and a drier brush and kind of moving some of that color around. Let's make this whole area dark. Okay, and you really need very little paint when it comes down to it here. And then we want more of our yellow browns, and I test that, and that's darker than I want, so without cleaning the brush I'm going to add more of the gamboge and maybe even get some more of that color into this compartment. Okay, now that's a nice, I like the yellows in there in our color range here on our little furry friends. What would we do with them without them these days? Okay, that looks fun. And then I might add just a little bit more of some darker colors here and there. And if you have a brush that's mostly dry with just a little bit of color, practice getting some little tiny brush strokes and see if you can add a little bit of detail that way. You can even follow along where some of the little stamped lines are as to where to shadow or highlight things. Okay, you don't want it a flat color. I think the interest is in seeing a little bit of the brush strokes. And this one now is looking lighter than I want, so I'm going to reach across here to find some of my darker, kind of blackish brown, and shadow under the ears a little bit here and there. Okay. On this one too, if I want to shadow what might have been white fur, let's test that. We've got just a real soft bit of color on my brush. And we're just adding a little bit of that soft color. That line looked pretty straight there. I might soften that a little bit. Okay, so I want to let that dry before I add to it, but I have a couple other ones prepared, so we might switch back and forth a little bit. So on this one, I'm going to do the backgrounds, and I thought it would be fun to incorporate some of the stamps from our other watercolor sets. luckily we can keep turning the palette around. You want to just keep it flat so that the colors don't run where you don't want them to. But let's do some soft sky behind here. I thought this little dog could actually be on a boat. And we're seeing the little boats out in the distance. Maybe he's still on land and he's over the fence. But anyway, he's got the ocean behind him. And over here I stamped just a little bit of these other trees in the background. And now we have a horizon line and we've got a sky. And, oh yes, I did want to add, I thought, why not add a little kite or a balloon up here in the background? So, just making this kind of playful. And again, having taped the edges, now I can stamp across them, and that will give me a nice scene in the background. So as we talked about in some of the earlier watercolor videos, to do puffy clouds, we're mostly working with the white of the paper, which means that what we need to paint is the blue area, of course, so we've got to think about the white that remains. So think about even scallops. This looks like an ocean. Uneven scallops are going to be more natural looking, and I'm going to paint the pointy areas that are represented in the dark color down here. That would be what I would paint blue, leaving these areas white when I want puffy clouds. That's also a download that you can access from our website, and I'm going to create some puddles of a soft blue here. And the inside blue, or the phthalo blue, is an easier color, and if you do it in a medium color wash, that will be the easiest to work with. Okay, and this is quite wet. I'm just kind of dancing my brush around, thinking about what that negative space of clouds looks like. And if you didn't want to paint all the way down and around the dogs, then you could simply leave white areas along the horizon. And now with some smaller brush strokes, I'm adding just some more little details, and that looks like a very fun little sky. If I want a little bit more color up at the top edge while it's wet, I might add a little bit of the outside marine blue. Over here. And again, this is pretty wet, so the two are going to mix together nicely. If I come back to it later, it would be more obvious where my brush strokes are. Okay, got a clean brush. If you get a really awkward shape to the clouds, I actually quite like those shapes, but you can always soften it with a damp brush that doesn't have dark blue on it, but just a little bit of moisture. Okay, so that looks very fun actually. Now for my horizon line, I'm going to wet this area that would be the water out here, and then I'm going to get some real intense of the phthalo blue on my brush, and I'm going to flood it right along that edge. It's such a beautiful color. And now I'm going to get more of that intense paint off my brush, and instead of going to the swamp, why not save some of it back to my puddle. Now I want just some more clean water, and I'm just going to touch it in here and let this run, giving me some very watery waves and hopefully some interesting watermarks. Okay. So now that is very wet, so I better not start painting anything else, but we'll let that dry and we'll come over here. Now I'm going to move over here, and the same way, let's see how much pigment is on my brush. This is quite dark, but I'm going to start it up here at the top. Think about my little puffy cloud shapes. And with the water in my brush, it's lightening already to a medium value. And I don't want the sky to be so dramatic that it takes away from my little puppy pile-up here, as we might say. We have to social distance, but here the dogs are all... Okay. I don't want to have a really hard edge here if it's real uneven looking. So I'm going to get a medium blue on my brush and just kind of dance around in here. And if you'll notice, if you're seeing clouds straight up, they will generally be larger overhead and smaller further away in the distance, which makes sense. It's not always that way, given the clouds may be varying sizes and all, but if that helps give you a more realistic look. So that edge dried pretty fast there. With the lights that I have here for the camera, that tends to happen sooner than it would for you at home. So I'm adding another color that's going to kind of help merge that together. Okay, but it's okay to leave some white down there. Along the horizon. And if your white shape looks kind of funny, then get it wet. And we've had some rain here in California, and the clouds have been absolutely beautiful. So if I want to lighten some areas, I'm pressing a barely damp brush, press and lift, and depending on the timing of when that hits the paper, you will lift away some of the color and see more of the white negative space of the paper. Okay, next I'm going to do some green of the park here, and I have yellow plus the phthalo blue in this compartment, and this will give me a nice lime green. If I want a more olive green, the yellow in this compartment is with the French ultramarine blue, and I have a place in my palette where we can mix some of that. So this is, I can tell by looking at my palette, a darker olivey color. So I'm going to start down here at the bottom edge, painting out to the tape. And then as I come up, I'm going to get some more of my well water and more of this yellow to lighten my greens so that the greens will go lighter as they get to the shrubbery off in the distance. And again, I've got so much paint and I need more water to lighten it before I get a hard line. So now with just a damp brush, that worked to move, soften that line and have a little bit of a fadeaway green off into the distance. And that simple rule will give you a more natural look. Okay, now you've maybe been watching over here how my my free flow wet on wet technique that I used with the ocean gave me a very interesting little bit of intense color along the horizon. So I was thinking I might paint some red down here to be like the red of the boat. So I'm going to turn my palette around This palette is wonderful in that it sits perfectly flat, and I can now access the rose, and you can see what I'm doing here. Test. Oh yeah, beautiful, beautiful red. So wherever he is, oops, I should have made sure if my blue had dried. Well, it's going to look like weathered red here. Okay, and while we have some red, might as well do tongues. Here we go, and we'll do all these little guys. We'll give that another minute to dry and come back and do a little bit more with these little fellas. And that will dry a little bit lighter, but I can create a highlight with a damp, mostly clean brush. Let's paint some background colors for fun. Okay, that's going to dry with some very interesting patterns up there, I can tell. You'll have to wait for the end for the reveal. Now we'll come back to these little fellas. And here we have the reveal of all of our little panels that we did with the fun watercolors. I hope this gives you some fun ideas, things to practice using your dog kisses. And if you haven't subscribed, be sure and have with your YouTube account that you subscribe so that you can be sure and not miss any of the videos that we have for you.